The banquet hall was drowning in white lilies and vanilla-scented candles. I sat at the center of the head table, my dark green velvet dress brushing against the crisp linen of the seat. I could feel the eyes of 50 guests tracing the silver in my hair, watching to see what kind of mother I would be, what kind of mother I had been. My hands rested neatly on the table folded over the embroidered napkin. They did not shake. Sienna stood. She clinked her glass with the side of her spoon, not gently, and cleared her throat like a performer ready for applause. "I have something to say," she announced loud enough that even the waitstaff in the back paused. My son Logan sat beside her chewing shrimp, as if he hadn't heard her tone, as if it were just another dinner. "I've held this in long enough," she said, "but tonight, I need to speak my truth." Her voice carried even over the low hum of string music playing through the speakers. "You disgust me." A silence fell like a dropped curtain. "From the first day I met you," Nora, she continued, her eyes locked on mine, "I knew you were going to be a problem." The champagne glass in her hand glittered, her dress white tight, too bridal for an engagement dinner, reflected the light like polished bone. A few gasps came from the tables. Others turned away, suddenly interested in their forks. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I looked at her the way I might watch a dog barking at its own reflection. "I can't live with you anymore," she said, turning slightly toward Logan. "And after the wedding, you're not living in the house. It's ours now. We need space for our children, our future. Not this." She gestured at me like I was a broken clock left ticking in the corner of someone else's life. Logan didn't lift his head. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and looked at his plate. Whispers started. Mrs. Harris from across the street raised a hand to her lips. Mr. Ortega, who cuts meat at the local grocery, clenched his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jump from where I sat. No one stood. No one defended. "She just sits there," Sienna added, laughing, as though this were an anecdote about a neighbor, not a mother. "She drags her feet in slippers and clatters pots around at 5 in the morning. It's like living with a ghost." I stayed still. That's what she wanted to shake something out of me. Rage tears shame. But I've played dead before to survive. "She's had her time," she said, stepping closer. She raised her child. That part of life is over. It's time for her to make room. I looked at her for a long moment. Her confidence was blooming into cruelty right in front of everyone, and still no one interrupted. I heard the second hand of the hall's large wall clock tick twice. Finally, I smiled. A small smile, careful and close-lipped. The kind of smile that waits for the wind to change. And then I raised my hand just slightly and gave a quiet nod to the master of ceremonies, who stood at the far end of the room near the sound booth. He nodded back. They had no idea I'd been preparing for this night for months. 5 years ago, the house was full of silence, but a softer kind, the kind that comes after a long life shared. My husband, Charles, passed away on a Tuesday morning with my hand in his. I still remember the way his fingers twitched just before they went still. The nurse had stepped out to adjust a machine. By the time she returned, the machine no longer mattered. I wore black for 2 months and gray for another 3. People from church brought over casseroles and offered empty kindness. But it was Logan who filled the kitchen with warmth again. Every Sunday, without fail, he arrived with coffee and a paper bag of blueberry bagels. We'd sit by the window in the kitchen where the light came through at just the right angle to make the dust look like snow, and he'd talk about work or traffic or the strange things people did at the hardware store where he managed deliveries. "You're not alone, Mom," he told me once, wrapping his fingers around mine. "Dad told me to take care of you, and I will. Always." I believed him. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because he said it the same way Charles used to say things like, "It was already done." When Logan lost his job a year later, he came home. I didn't hesitate. I told him the guest room was his, the fridge was his, the house was still his. "It's just temporary," he said, voice hoarse, with embarrassment, "until I find something new." I nodded. That was all I needed to hear. For the first few months, it felt almost like a blessing. We watched old westerns in the evenings, made popcorn in the dented pot Charles never let me throw away. Logan helped with groceries, fixed the leaky faucet in the back bathroom, painted the front porch when the wood started to splinter. Then she showed up. He met Sienna at a friend's engagement party. She was 25, working as an office assistant for a local real estate attorney. Her family had money, old money, from a string of rental properties and some chain of bridal boutiques. The first time he brought her over, I noticed she didn't sit back in the couch, just perched on the edge like the upholstery might stain her dress. She smiled at me with lips that didn't move above the teeth. "It's so quaint here," she said, looking at the faded photo frames lining the mantel. "Feels like stepping into history." After she left, Logan laughed. "She's just not used to older homes." "She means well." I nodded again, but something inside me pinched. Soon the bagels stopped arriving on Sundays. Logan stopped fixing things around the house. Instead, he started suggesting changes. New furniture, a different wall color, fewer knickknacks. "Sienna says the place feels cluttered," he told me one night, as if that explained everything. It wasn't long before he started repeating her phrases like gospel. He complained that my food was too salty, that my slippers made too much noise on the hardwood floors, that I should dress more age-appropriate when we had company. Little by little, he stopped sitting with me in the kitchen, stopped asking how I was sleeping, stopped seeing me at all. And then one afternoon I walked into his room to collect laundry and found the envelope that would undo everything. I had gone into his room with a basket of clean laundry and a headache. The sheets were still twisted from the night before the blinds drawn, even though the afternoon sun could have warmed the whole room. Logan was out running errands, he'd said, and I figured I'd put his clothes away before he came back. Old habits. The dust beneath his bed caught my eye. I crouched to slide the storage bins forward so I could sweep. That's when I saw it, a worn red folder, the kind Charles used to keep our insurance papers in. It was wedged between the wall and the bed frame, tucked just far enough to be missed, unless someone was cleaning with purpose. I pulled it out without thinking. But as soon as I saw my own name on the top page typed in bold next to words like collateral and property line, my fingers stopped working properly. It was a loan, $30,000. Approved 3 months ago. My name listed as the applicant. My signature at the bottom. Only I had never seen that paper before. I sat down on the edge of the bed folder, open in my lap, breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. I flipped through the rest. Copies of tax documents, scans of my driver's license. A blurry image of our house taken from the street with notes scribbled on the back. Appraised value 1 to 70K. Keep updates minimal until ownership transfer. Beneath that, a letter, handwritten in Sienna's looping script. "Logan, my parents are fine with the plan. Once the wedding's over, your mom can't live there anymore. Start looking into assisted living, nothing fancy, just somewhere with supervision. If we sell her old furniture, we can cover the first couple of months. Don't feel guilty. It's the cleanest way to handle this." There was no signature. Just a heart drawn in pink ink. I thought maybe that was the worst of it. That surely no more harm could fit into one folder. But then, tucked into a side pocket, I found a small receipt equipment rental from an electronics shop. And a list of dates. Audio files, it said. I opened my laptop and plugged in the USB drive that had been taped to the back of the folder. The first recording started mid-conversation. My voice clear as glass. I've got about 3,000 set aside in the drawer under the kettle. It's emergency money. For funeral expenses, or well, you never know. Then Logan's voice. Yeah. Smart mom. Don't worry. That's safe with me. I pressed pause. My hand hovered over the trackpad. My stomach was cramping, like I'd been kicked. He had been recording me, in my own house, my own kitchen, with no warning, no reason but to catalog my words like ammunition. I closed the laptop and sat there, folder still open, heart thudding too fast to keep up with my thoughts. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being prepared for removal. And that's when I knew I couldn't let them decide what happened to me. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table long before the sun came up. My coffee gone cold beside a folded napkin, I couldn't stop smoothing with my fingers. I waited until I heard Logan leave for work, a warehouse job he picked up 2 weeks earlier, and then I reached for the yellowed address book I kept inside the pantry. Mr. Ellison's number was still there. Charles had trusted him with everything from our wills to the deed on the house. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Is this Nora Wells? He asked, voice gravelly with age but still sharp. Yes, I said, my throat tightening. I need to speak with you. Privately. It's important. Within 2 days, we were sitting in his quiet office above the old pharmacy downtown, the same place Charles and I had signed our first loan papers 3 decades ago. I handed him the folder. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. He read everything in silence, nodding once in a while, adjusting his glasses. When he looked up, his eyes were heavy. We can build a case, he said. But it'll take care and time. I don't want revenge, I told him. I want protection. And that's what we built. We rewrote the will first. Logan was removed entirely. Every dollar, every possession, every corner of my life redirected to a children's shelter across the county line, the same one Charles used to donate to each Christmas. It felt right. It felt clean. Then came the equipment. Tiny audio recorders that could be hidden in books or coat pockets. A small camera that looked like a decorative wall hook. Mr. Ellison showed me how to activate each one. Every night, I labeled the files by date. Every morning, I listened for evidence. Logan and Sienna made it easy. They talked freely when they thought I wasn't listening. They mentioned price quotes on my furniture deadlines for when the old woman would be out of the way. They even joked about how I had no clue. I gave them what they expected. I shuffled slower. I nodded more. I told Sienna I was thinking about downsizing and asked Logan to help me look at nursing homes. Only Grace saw through it. She stopped by one afternoon with a plate of lemon squares and didn't leave until I told her part of the truth. You sure you know what you're doing? She whispered. I've never been more sure, I said. And when the engagement dinner invitation came a week later, I knew exactly how the story would end. Logan broke the news casually, like he was telling me the weather had cleared. Sienna and I set a date, he said, buttering toast one morning without looking up. We're having an engagement dinner in 3 weeks. She wants it to be formal. I nodded, as if this was expected. He cleared his throat. She also wants you there. It'd mean a lot if you came. I smiled just enough to be polite. Of course. That night, I called Mr. Ellison. I need one more favor, I told him. I want to make a video. Something they'll never forget. The video editor he found was a quiet man named Derek, who worked mostly on divorce depositions. He didn't ask questions when I handed him the recordings, just nodded and said, I've done worse. We met 3 times in a borrowed office at Mr. Ellison's firm. I gave Derek a flash drive with Logan's baby pictures. His first birthday kindergarten graduation. Him on Charles's shoulders at a 4th of July parade. Derek blended them with soft music and titles like A Mother's Love. Then the tone shifted. He overlaid the next segment with audio Logan's voice saying, I wouldn't know what was happening. Sienna laughing about selling my belongings phrases like she already signed. She can't back out now. He paired their voices with time-stamped screenshots, scanned bank documents, and the pink ink letter I had nearly torn in half. The final slide was plain white text on a black screen. This is the truth about Logan Wells and Sienna Moore. Derek sat back when it was done, eyes tired. It'll play clean. I've got it timed to cue on a click. Good, I said. When Logan asked if I wanted to say a few words at the dinner, I shook my head. Just a short video. A surprise, I said. Something for the memory books. He looked relieved. Sienna didn't ask a single thing. The night before the dinner, I laid out my dress, dark green velvet. The one Charles always said made me look like I walked out of a novel. I polished my mother's old pearl earrings and set them on the vanity. Then I stood in front of the mirror, stared into my own face, and said aloud to the quiet room, "Tomorrow, I stop being silent." And that next night, when I stepped into the hall, I wasn't anyone's mother. I was something else, entirely. The banquet hall shimmered with soft gold lights strung above linen-draped tables. Glasses clinked. Heels tapped across polished floors. Laughter floated up toward the ceiling. I sat between Logan and Sienna at the front table, smiling like any mother would on a night like this. Sienna stood lifting her champagne flute. Her dress clung to her like a secret. "Thank you all for being here," she began, voice smooth and bright. "We're so lucky to celebrate this next chapter with our closest friends and family." The room quieted. She turned to face me, her smile still painted on. "And I want to give a special thanks to Nora, my future mother-in-law. She's shown so much courage and grace in making space for our new life together." Her tone dipped just enough to draw attention. Not every woman her age would be so self-aware and willing to step aside. A few guests glanced at me, unsure how to react. Logan looked at his plate. I didn't move. I just nodded, slowly folded my hands in my lap, and held my smile. "Here's to fresh starts." Sienna finished raising her glass. There was a hesitant wave of applause, light and uneven. I turned slightly and gave a single deliberate nod to the MC. The lights dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC said, "the groom's mother has prepared a short video in honor of the couple." A few polite murmurs. The projector screen glowed to life. The music began, gently photos of Logan as a baby, a toddler at the beach, blowing out candles in the backyard. Guests smiled, some whispered fondly. Sienna relaxed beside me, the edge of her mouth curling up. Then the music changed. The next photo faded to a scanned document, my deed stamped and notarized, with a different signature pasted over mine. Then Logan's voice. "She won't even notice. She doesn't check her mail." A ripple moved through the room. Sienna's voice followed. "Once she's gone, we can sell most of it. Furniture, antiques, whatever. She won't be needing any of it at that place." Someone in the crowd gasped. Sienna started to rise from her chair. Logan reached for her arm. I placed my hand gently on his sleeve and leaned in. "Sit," I whispered, my voice clear, low. "You said you wanted unforgettable." The video kept playing, and the silence in the room turned into something heavier than sound. When the final clip faded to black, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. No music, no murmurs. Just the soft hum of the projector cooling down and the sound of forks abandoned mid-meal. I rose from my seat. "For 35 years," I said, turning to face them, "I was a mother, a wife, a woman who gave everything she had to the people she loved." My voice didn't shake. "And tonight, I am something else entirely. I am a woman who refuses to be discarded." All eyes were on me, but none mattered more than Logan's. He looked stunned, as if the face in the recordings didn't belong to him, as if this moment hadn't been earned over years of quiet betrayal. I raised my hand, and Mr. Ellison stepped forward from the corner of the room, carrying a small leather folder. "This is Mr. Ellison," I said, "my attorney. He worked with my late husband for over 30 years. Tonight, he will help clarify a few things." Ellison opened the folder and began. We have verified documentation proving Logan Wells committed mortgage fraud, including forged signatures on a home equity loan using his mother's property as collateral. In addition, we've collected over 20 hours of recorded audio that demonstrate a coordinated effort between Mr. Wells and Ms. Moore to remove Mrs. Wells from her home for financial gain. He looked up, his tone cold. All legal steps have been taken. The bank has been notified, and I stepped back in. And as of last month, my will has been revised. Logan Wells is no longer my heir. Every asset, every dollar, every square inch of that house will go to the Riverton Children's Shelter. Gasps. A chair scraped the floor. Logan stood, his hands trembling. Mom, please, can we talk about this? Just the two of us. No, I said, looking him in the eyes. No more private conversations. No more hallway whispers. No more pretending. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand again. You're not my son, I said quietly. You're a stranger who lives in my house illegally. And that night, beneath the shimmer of gold lights and stunned silence, I turned and walked away from him for the last time. They left without saying goodbye. Logan kept his head down. Sienna marched ahead of him like she still had something to salvage. The guests parted for them in silence, the way you step aside for a mess you don't want to track into your own home. Mr. Ellison and I stayed until the last glass was cleared, until every whisper had faded into the night. In the days that followed, neighbors came by with casseroles cards, even a bouquet of garden roses from Mrs. Harold across the street. Grace brought over paint samples and sat with me on the porch while we picked out the shade that would become my new kitchen walls. Bright yellow, like warm morning light. The locks were changed within a week. The fraudulent loan was canceled after the bank reviewed the evidence. Mr. Ellison made sure every thread was clean and closed. Logan's name was scrubbed from everything. I booked a train to Santa Fe on a quiet Tuesday, packed one small bag, and left before the morning news aired. I stayed in a modest inn and walked through open-air markets with a paperback novel tucked under my arm. One evening, I joined a local book club that welcomed me like I was someone worth knowing, not someone to be managed. When I came home, the house felt lighter, empty in the best way. I painted. I cooked what I liked. I sat by the window and remembered who I was before everything blurred into sacrifice. Months later, a letter arrived. Logan's handwriting on the envelope, careful and too familiar. I opened it. He asked for forgiveness. I read it once, then folded it and placed it in the drawer where I keep the spare light bulbs. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to pain. What would you do if your own child planned to erase you? Would you choose revenge or your freedom? And can dignity ever be taken if you choose to fight for it?